All right, so today we're really diving deep, focusing specifically on Bangladesh, and we're using the World Economic Forum's Global Risks Report 2024 as our guide.
Sounds intense.
It is. There's a lot to unpack. Basically, we're going to try to pinpoint the biggest threats Bangladesh is facing, the ones that seem most likely to actually happen, and yeah, figure out just how bad things could get.
Okay, makes sense.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty, we got to remember that everything we talk about today comes from expert opinions, forecasts, and, well, educated guesses.
Right, exactly. It's all based on the World Economic Forum's Global Risks Perception Survey from, let me check, 2023, 2024. So it's a great resource, really insightful, but it's not like a prophecy or anything.
Yeah, more like a heads up, right? A way to understand what smart people are worried
Yeah,
about.
exactly. And, it's important to remember that, there are always different perspectives and opinions out there.
Absolutely. And we're just focusing on this one report today.
Right.
Okay, so globally, one of the biggest risks the report highlights for the next 2 years is misinformation and disinformation.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
And this is especially relevant for Bangladesh. The report specifically mentions Bangladesh, along with some other countries like India, Indonesia, the UK, places that are all expecting some pretty important elections.
I see where you're going with this.
Right. So the report suggests that all this misinformation and disinformation flying around, especially during these elections, it could actually, it could really undermine people's trust in the legitimacy of the newly elected governments.
Yeah, I can see that. If people are constantly bombarded with false information or manipulated narratives, especially during such crucial times, it's bound to create doubts and sow discord.
Exactly. And the report doesn't shy away from the potential consequences. Straight out says this kind of distrust could lead to unrest.
Makes sense. Think about it. If people don't have faith in the electoral process or the results, it can create a really volatile situation, possibly even lead to protests and, well, who knows what else.
Yeah, it paints a pretty concerning picture for Bangladesh's immediate future.
And what's really concerning is that the report points out that societies that are already kind of, politically polarized, they're even more susceptible to this kind of manipulation.
Because people are already kind of entrenched in their beliefs.
Right.
So it's easier to feed them information that just reinforces what they already think, whether it's true or not.
Exactly. And in places where there's maybe already some distrust in traditional media or institutions, it doesn't take much to push people further apart and create more division and instability.
So yeah, a pretty serious threat that we need to keep an eye on.
Definitely.
Now, shifting gears a bit, another major short-term global risk the report highlights is extreme weather events.
Oh, yeah. Climate change. That's the big one.
Right. And while the report doesn't get into specific weather predictions for Bangladesh, it does talk about this broader trend of nonlinear climate impacts.
Oh, nonlinear. That sounds complicated.
It is, but it's crucial to understand, especially for a country like Bangladesh that's already super vulnerable to climate change.
Okay, so break it down for me. What does nonlinear actually mean in this context?
So imagine it like this. You're pushing a system, like the Earth's climate, further and further, and then suddenly you hit a tipping point, a threshold where things change dramatically and often irreversibly.
Like a domino effect.
Kind of, yeah. It's like these thresholds in the Earth's system that, once crossed, can trigger rapid and unpredictable changes in the climate.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. But how does this relate specifically to Bangladesh?
Well, the report suggests that we could be approaching some of these tipping points sooner than we think, possibly even if we manage to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Wow, that's a scary thought.
And what's even more worrying is that, according to the report, a lot of economies, especially in the global south, might not be prepared for these kinds of sudden and dramatic climate shifts.
So Bangladesh could be caught off guard?
Potentially, yeah. And the report highlights that crossing these tipping points could speed up climate change even further, like through the release of more greenhouse gases.
Making things even worse.
Exactly. And the report explicitly states that it's countries in the global south, which includes Bangladesh, that are already facing the most severe consequences of climate change.
So Bangladesh is kind of on the front lines of this climate crisis.
Sadly, yeah. The potential for massive damage from these accelerated climate impacts, combined with the huge investments needed to adapt, it's a huge challenge for countries like Bangladesh.
Yeah, it's like they're facing this double whammy of dealing with the immediate crises caused by extreme weather events and trying to prepare for the long-term consequences of these rapid climate shifts.
A really tough situation.
Definitely.
Now, moving on to the economic front, the report also points to growing pressures on low and middle-income countries. And a big part of that is the cost of living crisis.
Oh, yeah, that's something everyone's feeling.
Right, but it hits developing nations like Bangladesh even harder.
Because they're already dealing with limited resources and infrastructure, right?
Exactly. And the report highlights that countries with high levels of debt are particularly vulnerable, especially if interest rates stay high for a prolonged period.
So if Bangladesh has a lot of debt and interest rates keep going up, that could put a real strain on their economy.
Absolutely. And while the report doesn't give us specific debt figures for Bangladesh, it's safe to assume that as a developing economy, they could face some serious economic challenges in that kind of scenario.
Makes sense. It's like a domino effect, right? High interest rates lead to bigger debt payments, which leaves less money for essential services and development projects.
Precisely. And it's not just about the country's overall debt. The report also talks about how it's becoming harder for individuals to find stable livelihoods.
Meaning it's tougher to find decent work and make a living, right?
Yeah, and as economic pressures increase, the report suggests that opportunities for secure jobs and a better quality of life could shrink even further.
So what does that mean for people in Bangladesh?
Well, imagine struggling to put food on the table, afford health care, or give your kids a good education.
Those are basic necessities.
Exactly. And if people can't find reliable work, it creates a ripple effect that impacts every aspect of their lives and the country's overall development.
It's like a vicious cycle. Poverty leads to fewer opportunities, which leads to more poverty.
Sadly, yeah.
And, it's interesting because this whole issue of lack of economic opportunity is actually a new entry on the global risks list, and the report predicts it's going to get even worse in the long term.
So it's not just a short-term blip, it's a trend we need to pay attention to.
Absolutely. And what's striking is that for lower middle income countries like Bangladesh, unemployment is often ranked as a top national threat.
It's a major concern for people, and understandably so.
Right, and the report highlights that this growing lack of economic opportunity is partly driven by these big global shifts that are happening, like the transition to green economies, advancements in AI, changes in global demographics, and all the geopolitical tensions going on.
So it's like a perfect storm of factors converging to create this challenging economic landscape.
Exactly. And the worry is that these trends could widen the gap between the skills people have and the skills that are in demand in the job market, leading to even higher unemployment and fewer pathways to economic improvement.
So it's not just about creating more jobs, it's about creating the right kind of jobs that match the skills people are developing.
Yeah, it's about preparing people for the jobs of the future.
Now let's dig into some of the more specific findings for Bangladesh from the report's Executive Opinion Survey.
Okay, what did they highlight?
Well, it turns out that business leaders in Bangladesh ranked cybercrime and cyber insecurity as one of their top 10 risks for the next 2 years.
Really? That's interesting. Why do you think that is?
It seems to align with this global trend the report identifies, this increasing use of digital tools in criminal activities.
So it's not just traditional crime anymore, it's all this online stuff too.
Exactly. The report calls it digitally blended criminal models. These are operations that combine online and offline methods to generate revenue.
So for Bangladesh, this means businesses are worried about things like data breaches, financial fraud, and maybe even attacks that could disrupt their entire operations.
Yeah, and it's not just about losing money, it's also about losing trust and reputation.
Right. If customers don't feel like their data is safe, they're going to take their business elsewhere.
It's a huge challenge, and it seems like it's only going to get more complex as technology advances.
Definitely.
And speaking of challenges, the Executive Opinion Survey also points to illicit economic activity as a major risk for Bangladesh.
Oh, that's interesting. What exactly does that cover?
Well, it's a bit broad, but the report generally links it to things like corruption, illegal trade, money laundering, activities that operate outside the legal framework and can really undermine a country's economy.
It's like a hidden drain on resources, right?
Yeah.
It takes money away from legitimate businesses and can make it harder for the overall economy to grow.
Exactly. And while the report doesn't specifically categorize Bangladesh as a fragile state, it does note a general correlation between criminal activity and state fragility.
So the fact that business leaders in Bangladesh see this as a major risk, it kind of suggests concerns about these underlying issues.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely.
Now, switching gears again, let's talk about how Bangladesh is preparing for climate change. The report includes a section on adaptation readiness using something called the ND Gain Country Index.
Okay, what's that all about?
So this index basically measures how prepared different regions and countries are to deal with the impacts of climate change, like how well they can cope with things like rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and changes in agricultural productivity.
So where does Bangladesh stand on this index?
Well, the report places Bangladesh within the Southern Asia region, but it doesn't provide specific scores for the country.
So it's more of a relative comparison.
Exactly. It gives us a sense of how Bangladesh compares to other countries in the region in terms of their preparedness, but it doesn't delve into the specific details of their strengths and weaknesses.
I see. So it's a starting point for further analysis.
Right, it highlights that Bangladesh is part of a region that faces significant climate challenges, but it doesn't give us a complete picture of the country's specific capabilities and what more needs to be done.
Right. It's like a broad overview, not a deep dive.
Exactly.
So we need more information to really understand how well Bangladesh is positioned to adapt to climate change.
Absolutely.
Speaking of climate change in Bangladesh, there's this one really powerful image in the report. It's a map showing the potential impact of sea level rise.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. It's pretty stark.
It is. So under a scenario where sea levels rise by zero point 0.6 meters, which is a very real possibility according to current projections, significant portions of Bangladesh are shown as being underwater.
It's a chilling reminder of just how vulnerable Bangladesh is to rising sea levels.
Yeah, I mean, imagine the scale of displacement, the loss of agricultural land, the economic disruption.
It would be devastating.
It would, and it really underscores the urgency of tackling climate change and helping Bangladesh adapt to these inevitable changes.
Absolutely. Taking a step back and looking at everything we've discussed today, it's clear that Bangladesh faces a complex and interconnected web of challenges.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
In the short term, the risks of misinformation during these upcoming elections and the increasing severity of extreme weather events, those are really pressing concerns.
And then you layer on top of that the longer-term challenges like lack of economic opportunity, the rise of cybercrime and illicit activities, and of course, the looming threat of sea level rise.
It paints a pretty daunting picture.
It does, but I think it's also important to remember that while the report highlights these risks, it also emphasizes the need for proactive and strategic planning to build resilience and mitigate these potential crises.
Right. It's not all doom and gloom. There's still a lot that can be done.
Exactly. And while this report provides a great overview of the global risks landscape and how it impacts Bangladesh, I think it also underscores the need for more in-depth analysis of the country's specific vulnerabilities and its capacity to adapt.
So more research, more data, more targeted strategies.
Yeah, because ultimately understanding these global risks and how they specifically impact a nation like Bangladesh is essential for creating a more secure and sustainable future for its people.
It's about connecting the global and the local, recognizing the interconnectedness of these challenges.
Exactly. And I think that's a key takeaway for our listeners, too. Even as we grapple with the immediate issues in our own lives, it's crucial to stay informed about these broader global risks and how they might be playing out in different parts of the world, like Bangladesh.
Because ultimately, we're all in this together, right?
Yeah.
The challenges facing Bangladesh are part of a larger global picture, and understanding them is crucial for building a more resilient and sustainable future for everyone.
Couldn't said it better myself.
So yeah, that's our deep dive into the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report 2024 with a special focus on Bangladesh. Hopefully this has given you some food for thought and maybe even sparked your curiosity to learn more about the multifaceted issues and opportunities facing this nation in the years to come.
And maybe even inspired some action.
Absolutely.
Because awareness is great, but it's action that really makes a difference.
Couldn't agree more.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time.
See ya.
Bye.